Prime Minister Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, was on Meet the Press this morning. I want to get your reactions to some of the things he said. One of the things he said is that there could be a potential hostage deal with Hamas. Can you give us any details on that?
We are working literally by the hour, Jonathan, to try to secure the release of all the hostages. There has been active negotiation and conversations going on with our counterparts in the region, all throughout, including Israel, including Qatar. We're hopeful that we can get somewhere, but I don't have a specific update for you today.
So I was about to ask, is it likely to be soon that we could hear more details?
I really don't want to get into too much detail because, again, the less said publicly about these sensitive negotiations and conversations, probably the better.
That's exactly what the Prime Minister told Kristen. So another thing that he said was that he would not commit to supporting an international force in Gaza, and he opposes the Palestinian Authority returning to Gaza. He said the overall military responsibility will have to be with Israel. Your reaction to that?
Well, we don't want to see, and the president has been very consistent on this, we don't want to see a reoccupation of Gaza by Israel. We think that's not only not good for Israel, it's not good for the people of Gaza. So we do not support that. What we do support is some sort of governance in Gaza long term that includes the voices and the votes and the self-determination of the Palestinian people. Now, what does that look like? We don't know yet. We're asking ourselves those questions literally every day as well, and we're going to continue to talk to our Israeli counterparts about that. But we've been very clear. Reoccupation of Gaza is not in the best interest of anyone.
Are your Israeli counterparts also having those conversations about what comes next?
We are having those conversations with our Israeli counterparts, yes. Now, what they're saying inside their war cabinet, I'll let them speak to you, Jonathan, but we are certainly having those conversations, and we are asking those questions. Quite frankly, I think they're asking those questions of themselves, too. We don't have a set piece answer to what governance in Gaza needs to look like, but I can tell you that we're very focused on that.
Another thing that the Prime Minister said on Meet the Press was he repeatedly said the IDF ground offensive is reducing the number of civilian casualties because the population is heeding the call to vacate zones of fighting. Is that true?
I think he's talking about these humanitarian pauses that they announced earlier in the week, where for 4 hours at a time, 3 hours a heads up to get people out. They've also added a second avenue corridor, safe passage down along the coast, so to leave North Gaza to get into southern Gaza. So they have put in place measures to try to allow for people to leave, and that will unquestionably, just mathematically speaking, it will take people out of harm's way and therefore reduce the potential harm to them. They're also in the ground operations. They've moved into Gaza City in a way that is less fulsome in terms of the number of troops as what they had originally expected to do. So when you're doing it with smaller units and on the ground, you can be a little bit more cautious. But I want to be clear that there have been many thousands of innocent Palestinians killed, and each one is a tragedy, and we grieve and mourn with every single one, and we know that there are loved ones left behind here. The proper number of civilian casualties ought to be 0, and everybody ought to be working to that goal.
Let me get you on one more question, because the Secretary of State Antony Blinken has basically said what you just said. There far too many Palestinians have been killed in Gaza. Is Prime Minister Netanyahu listening to these entreaties from U.S. officials? Is he hearing what you just said?
I can tell you that almost since the early hours of this conflict, Jonathan, as a part of every conversation that we're having with our Israeli counterparts, from the Prime Minister all the way down, we talk about civilian casualties and the need to be respectful of innocent life, to abide by the laws of war, which Hamas won't do, and to try to minimize civilian casualties. And that is, we even sent over some military officers, some expertise. These are leaders that have fought in places like Mosul and Fallujah, urban warfare environments, to share our perspectives and lessons learned about reducing civilian casualties. And we're going to keep having those conversations.
One more question for you. Yesterday in Saudi Arabia, there was a summit, an Arab summit, that included not just the Saudi crown prince, but also the presidents of Iran and Syria. And they put out a resolution where they called not only for a ceasefire and an end to all of this, but accused Israel of war crimes. Your reaction to that summit and to this resolution and what they're calling for?
Well, certainly let our Saudi counterparts speak to their summit and who they invited and why. Obviously, we have our views about Bashar al-Assad and certainly President Raisi and the regime in Tehran as destabilizing actors and certainly increasing threats in the region. But you know what's a war crime? It's paragliding into a music festival and slaughtering young people that are just there to listen to some music and have a good time, murdering families, children in front of their parents and parents in front of their children. A war crime is headquartering your command and control in the basement of a hospital or a school, or digging tunnels under residential facilities and using humans as shields to prevent operations from being conducted against you. Hamas has committed what we would consider war crimes, against the law of armed conflict. Now, it's a terrorist organization, so they'll tell you, well, they don't have to abide by that. But they're the ones committing these atrocities. And for all the civilian casualties, and each one's tragic, Jonathan, each one, we are not seeing that same intent out of the Israeli Defense Forces. I'm not saying that civilian casualties haven't happened. They absolutely have. But it is not a war aim of Israel to commit genocide on the people of Gaza. It's not a war aim for them to go out and deliberately try to kill innocent civilians the way Hamas is doing.